אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבט אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבט אחים גם yachad. Your Madrichei Shira are amazing. I'm super duper impressed with them. They're fabulous people. Shabbat Shalom. As Michael Kaplan said to me earlier tonight, this, while for some of you might be the first time you see me, this is far from my first time being in this sanctuary. It very much feels like coming home for me. When I first came to Los Angeles for rabbinical school, Rabbi Kipnis, Rabbi Weiss, this community reached out to me as someone who might be able to contribute in the religious school and with the incredible youth group that exists here. And little did I know that over the course of the 2 years I spent here, I would be welcomed in such a powerful way. Never take for granted the warmth and welcoming that is inherent, that is baked into this community. It is unique, it is special, it is really and truly something that makes this community shine. And as we bring Shabbat in together tonight, one of the texts that we always start with, no matter practically what synagogue you're in the world, is all about welcoming. But not just welcoming anybody. It's welcoming in these Malachei Hasharet, these angels that serve God. And we read just about around where we are now in the Torah portion about our patriarch Abraham and his ability to welcome these strangers in the wilderness who needed a place to rest and wash and eat for the night, and how they turned out to be angels of God. And we try to model that welcoming in everything we do. And Shalom Aleichem is all about that moment of welcoming in these Shabbos angels that will sort of hover over us and protect us or guide us through Shabbat. So as a means of sort of welcoming myself back, but also introducing myself, I thought I'd share my melody for Shalom Aleichem. It is very jazzy. It is probably not like any Shalom Aleichem you've ever heard. That's the point. I hope you really like it, and I hope you catch on and sing with me, and that goes for everything I share tonight. So Shalom Aleichem can be found on page 24 in your Sidurim, should you desire to follow along with the words in Siddur. I certainly do. And the melody goes something like this. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That exact melody for all 4 sections, so if you can catch on, sing it with me. You can do it. Believe in yourself. Here we go. Boachem, Boachem, Shalom. Malachei Hashalom. Malachei Hashalom. Malachei. Malachei Elyon. Elyon. Mi Melech. Malachei HaMelachim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu me the Shalom, bless me with Shalom. 3rd stanza down. Baruch Hu me the Shalom. Malachei Hashalom. Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech. Malachei HaMelachim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're getting it. Chance if you want to try it. Seitchem l'shalom, go in peace, but not too soon we hope. Seitchem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei הקדוש ברוך הוא, מי מלך מלאכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. Let's just sing Shalom Aleichem one last time. Shalom Aleichem.
Shabbat Shalom. Welcome. Thank you all for coming out this Shabbat to worship with us, to learn, to hear beautiful music. I'm Rabbi Paul Kipnis, one of the rabbis here at Congregation RME. Rabbi Julia Weiss is on the East Coast installing our second rabbinic intern from last year, Alana Nemitov, who's in Connecticut. The other one's in Massachusetts. And Cantor Doug is on some well-deserved vacation. We are here tonight to celebrate Shabbat. In a while after the formal part of the service ends, we'll have a chance to listen to and speak with our congressperson, Ted Lieu, one of the congress people that covers the catchment area of the congregation, and we'll introduce him in a little bit. But tonight is a special Shabbat in addition, because we're calling this Shabbat Music Lab. We have a cantor who is second to none. And it just happens that this was happening. This was when Noah was available and the cantor happened to be off today. But the idea is that there's so much fabulous music coming from cutting-edge composers and singers and songwriters that let's bring them into Congregation RME. And so with the support of a number of congregants, this year we have 5 different singer-songwriter, musicians, composers coming in. And one of the first is Noah Diamondstein. As he told you, he taught in our religious school. He excited, engaged our young people. He transformed with Rabbi Julia our youth services. And he inspired our Madrechei Shira, our young song leaders. I think you started the program with Rabbi Julia. Noah is a multi-instrumentalist who plays almost every instrument on his records, from guitar to bass to drums to banjo to mandolin to vocals and to more. Did I miss anything?
More covers the rest, I think.
Fantastic. His lyrics, he goes from folk to pop to hard rock. You'll hear a whole bunch of his music here. His lyrics address prayer, mental health, Israel bettering the world, and what it means to be strong. Most exciting is that Noah's first album, Ashira Ladonai, was recorded in 2018 and produced and engineered by the notable Jewish music artist Dan Nichols. This album is fantastic, and later on I'll tell you about it, how you can get a CD or a card to download it. If you don't know what that means, you want a CD because your computer probably still has a slot to do that, but I'll tell you about that later. But so tonight we will spend some time and hear some beautiful music and be uplifted. Let your mind open to the music as the prayers sink in different ways. We also later on will talk about tonight as an anniversary of many things. We're here in the week of the anniversary of the shootings at the Borderline Bar and Dance Club. We are here, and this is the week, this may be the day, a year plus or minus, when the fires, particularly the Woodley fire, what's that? Yeah, today, that sent about 80% of our congregation out into evacuation, or were in mandatory evacuation. And then where Congregation RME, our clergy, our interns, and volunteers really led the West Valley Jewish community to connect and support each other during these times. And then also, this is the anniversary of Kristallnacht, that night of broken glass, and we'll tell you about that. We'll talk a little bit about that later on before Kaddish. But for now, we want to welcome you all here. Thank you for worshiping with us, and I'd like to call up the past president, past president, I guess, of our youth group, now a student at UC Riverside, a child of social justice, love of Israel, and the inspiration for some of these youth packages we sent out to young adults from the congregation all over the country. So Maya Weiss, come on up and help us light candles. Let's turn to page 2.
וציוונו להדליקנה, וציוונו וציוונו להדליקנה, וציוונו וציוונו להדליקנה, של שעה.
Negligent if I didn't warmly welcome all of you who are worshiping with us via the live stream. Thank you for being with us, celebrating Shabbat with us. Thank you to Bronze Productions for making it happen. Our service continues with the Baruch Hu, page 28. Please rise.
On page 32, we find the text of Ahavat Olam, one of the few blessings that come before the Shema, specifically in our tradition for the evening. And it talks about God's love for us. And it's not a cliche love. It's a really deep and meaningful love that we're talking about here, because it's not the kind of love that screws up and then buys you a box of chocolates to make it better. It's the kind of love that makes us better people. We get that love through Torah, through the tradition that we're given. And when I was at the URJ Kutz camp as a song leading major teacher, I was looking at, well, I wasn't even looking at these words yet, actually. I had this melody in my head, and I kept singing it over and over and over again, and I was like, this is probably going to be a song at some point, but I have no idea what it's going to be. And my friend Danielle, who's in the cantorial school right now, came to me and said, you should put some words to that. I said, I don't know what it should be. She said, well, open the Siddur, see what comes up. And when this prayer of love and this melody collided with each other, it was like Beshert, speaking of love. I mean, it really felt, they felt like they belonged to each other. And you actually already learned it. I mean, some of you did. Those of you who were paying attention during the beginning of services when we were schmoozing and sitting down, heard this melody already tonight. It goes like this. Wanna try it? תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו למדת. Then we're going to jump to Ki Hem Chayenu, about 6 lines from the bottom. Ki Hem Chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem neged yomam v'layla. Just keep on going. Ve'ahavatcha al tasir mimenu le'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael. Say ki hem chayenu, ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem neged yomam v'layla. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. Sing אוהב, אוהב עמו ישראל, אוהב עמו ישראל. Continue with the Shema, with the words, beautiful words, composed by the incredible cantor of this community. The Shema can be found on page 35. If you're lost, you feel afraid, and you don't know what to say, page 40, we'll find our Song of Freedom, Micha Mocha. Micha Mocha is part of the Song of the Sea. It's that moment when we've crossed the sea, we've made it out of Egypt, and we're free. And what do? We all sing the same song with the same melody at the same time, seemingly out of nowhere. I guess that's the power of a strong female leader, because Miriam leads us in this song, and it's really an incredible moment. And theoretically, all we have are drums or timbrels or whatever those are, or tambourines. And that same summer that I wrote that Ahavat Olam melody, I was sitting at Kutz in what's called the Teatron, which is this sort of outdoor theater-like structure that actually extends out onto the water of their lake. So if you're standing at the edge of it and looking out the open walls, I mean the walls only come up to about my chest and then they're totally open, you're literally looking down into the water. And so I got to thinking about that moment, being near the water all the time when I was praying. And I asked myself the question, what would have been the background noise at the sea? Like, behind all those drums and all the singing, what would have been the sound?
Screaming? Scared to death?
Ah, yeah, well, Egyptian soldiers drowning slowly in the water, maybe? A little dark? If that's what you brought with you to Shabbat this evening, no. What I imagined was the sound of the water crashing against the shore, waves coming up against the beach. All of you, these Jews, know what that sounds like. I mean, growing up in eastern Pennsylvania, maybe not so much, but here that's a sound that's somewhat common for us. But imagine if you had been a slave in the center of Egypt for a long time. Imagine if you had only known slavery. This might have been one of the first moments you would have ever had enough stillness and such an opportunity to hear that sound, the rushing of those waves. And so I wrote a nigun that accompanies this melody of Micha Mocha that we're going to sing tonight, that I just try to imagine waves coming in and out on a beach. So hopefully we'll figure it out. The nigun goes like this. Blessed are you, Adonai, for redeeming Israel. We'll turn ahead to page 44. We'll save Hashkivenu for when we're actually going to go home and lie ourselves down to sleep. And instead we'll sing our favorite song, straight from the Torah, all about why we're here tonight. Shamru b'nei Yisrael et Hashabat la'asot et Hashabat אותי לעולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי, that's today, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. Oh, you can do better than that, come on. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
There was that moment at the burning bush when Moses spoke to God. It was that moment of prayer that a line becomes part of the Amidah, the standing prayer. Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. Moses asks, who are you? How do I tell people who you are? God says, I'm the God of your ancestors. God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. God of Sarah, God of Rebekah, God of Rachel, and God of Leah. Moses didn't have a prayer book at that moment. He stood before a near Tamid, an eternally burning light, and he poured out his heart. So I'm going to invite everybody to stand now. And we're going to do a silent Amidah. If you need to, you can pray in the books, page 48 onward. Or you might be like Moses. Stand before that light, that burning bush, and open up your heart to the words deep inside. We'll begin with our nigun, and then we'll pray when you are finished. You'll be seated, please, and then we'll continue.
page 62. רצון עם רעיפי והגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי וגואלי אדוני צורי וגואלי לרצון עם רעיפי והגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי וגואלי אדוני צורי וגואלי May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai my God. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai my God. So, there's only one song from the record that me and Dan got to make together that isn't specifically built for prayer that I'm going to share with you tonight. And it feels like the right one from the record because it's all about the experience we're having right now. Not necessarily Shabbat specifically, but at least for those of us in the room who are Jewish, the experience of being a Jew living in diaspora. I wrote this song in 2018. It was sort of inspired by a drash that I had written for my student pulpit up in Merced. And it was about this incredible midrash where Jacob lies his head down on the rock and has the dream where he sees the ladder to heaven. And in this midrash, Jacob sees 4 angels, not just a whole multitude or not just one, but specifically 4. And they're not just any angels. They are, in fact, the angels that represented the 4 great kingdoms or empires that back in the ancient world made life really, really hard on the Hebrew people, on the Israelites, on the Jews. And that's Persia, Rome, Greece, and Assyria. These 4 ancient kingdoms. And the Midrash gets told 2 ways. The first way goes like this. Jacob sees the angels going up and down on the ladder, and he sees the angel of Assyria go up so many rungs and come back down. And then he sees the angel of Greece go even higher than that and come back down. And then Persia goes even higher still and comes back down. And Rome goes so high that Jacob can no longer see the angel of Rome. This midrash is written about 70 years or so before Rome falls, around the year 400. And Jacob says to God, what's the deal? Is Rome never going to fall? And God says to Jacob, don't worry. Even if Rome flew like an eagle and made its nest right beside me, I would still bring them down eventually. That's version 1. Version 2 is a little different. In version 2, All 4 kingdoms go up and down the ladder, even Rome. And then God says to Jacob, it's your turn. It's time for Israel to get on the ladder. But Jacob's a smart cookie. And he says to God, I just watched the 4 most powerful empires that ever roamed this earth go up and come crashing down. Isn't the same thing going to happen to me? And God says to Jacob, Im ata oleh, if you climb, ein lecha yerida, there will not ever be a fall for you. But the kicker of the story is that Jacob doesn't believe God and doesn't get on the ladder. Our people took it upon ourselves to get on the ladder in around the turn of the 20th century, and certainly by the time 1948 rolled around. And now we've got these 2 different nations on the ladder at once. It's almost like we've got our feet trying to wrap around both sides. On the one foot, we're Americans. This is our home. I've never known a home other than this country. I love this country. On the other foot, we have Israel. This incredible visionary place that, just like America, is full of incredible flaws and challenges, and just like America, is leading the world in our name. And we're climbing this ladder sort of on both sides at once. But what happens when one of our feet starts to stumble? What happens when one of our nations falls a few rungs down? Do we get pulled apart by that? I wrote this song in 2018, 17 years after the fall of the Twin Towers. I was playing on sevens a lot. It was the 70th year of the 70th anniversary of Israel's creation, 17 years since the Twin Towers. And as the song begins, 70 years before the fall of Rome. The song is called Climb. 70 years before the fall of Rome, a couple of guys were sitting in their homes afraid and wondering softly, I'm not sure about this country here. It's sometimes great, but then it's not so clear that we can choose our future. We just have to climb up Jacob's ladder. Gotta make the choice, raise our voice, and we watch the angels climb, rising up on eagles' wings, and soon we saw them come back down again. Oh, it's your time to take that step, 'cause you know she'im ata oleh ein lecha yerida. 17 years since the towers fell, no ladders, dreams, no fairy tales. Oh, how could Jacob know? We stood in fear watching TV, thinking aloud, how did hell become real? Our demons rise and we divide. We just have to climb up Jacob's ladder. Gotta make the choice, raise our voice, and we watch the angels climb, rising up on eagles' wings, and soon we saw them come back down again. Whoa, it's your time to take that step, 'cause you know she'im ata oleh ein lecha yerida. One ladder, one people, two nations, two angels, one vision, peace in our time. Climb. 70 years since we built our home, someone yelled, we are not alone. We climb rung after rung, sticks and stones and wounded hearts, wars and walls can't put out the spark we dream. Just like our Father, we just have to climb up Jacob's ladder. Gotta make good choice, raise our voice, and we watch the angels climb, rising up on eagles' wings. And soon we saw them come back down again. Whoa, it's our chance to chase that dream. We know She'imanu Olim Ein Lanu Yerida. Climb and climb and climb and climb and climb.
I'm Meir Bargeron. I'm a rabbinic intern here, and it is such an honor to share the bima with Rabbi Paul, as I have before, and I will again, and with my classmate and tonight my teacher, Noah Diamondstein. As Noah taught us in words and in song, angels and nations, and as we know in our experience, people go up and go down. Our lives move up in joy and at unpredictable moments descend in pain, sorrow, loss. And as a community, as a Jewish community, we have a way of being with each other for those moments. We will be saying the blessing for healing, Misha Berach, in just a moment. But I wanted to reflect briefly just on how it is that this blessing works for us. We come together to pray for our healing and for the healing of people we love and for people we don't know. And we also wish and pray for people's well-being. We don't do this as individuals. We do this as a community, because this prayer shows us not only that we are actually here for each other, quite literally at this moment, but also reinforces that we need each other. So we will be praying, not as individuals, but as a holy community, for those who are in need of healing of body, of mind, and of spirit, recognizing that dis-ease takes many forms. Tonight we will be praying for the survivors of the borderline shooting and for the families of those who perished. Tonight we'll be praying for all who have suffered due to wildfires recently and last year, and the 2018 Woolsey fire is particularly in our memories this Shabbat. We pray also for caregivers who love and support those who live with illness and with injury. And tonight, we pray for those who are in our hearts. What I'd like to ask of you is, if there's someone in your heart tonight, I want to invite you to share their name and a word about their relationship to you, my father, my brother, my friend, so that we can pray for them with you. And we'll start on this side of the room and call out the name of someone who's in your heart.
Grandma Avery.
My mother-in-law, Lenore Rose.
My husband Rusty. My daughter Rachel. My cousin
My
Paul.
mother-in-law, Early.
Our friends, the Dimitri's.
Reverend Peter Wells.
We pray for them with you. Please turn in your Sidurim to the Misha Berach on page 253, 253.
Amen. A few quick announcements. Our Orami Center for Jewish Learning continues. Our next guest will be on Friday, December 6th, in a month, Social Justice Shabbat with Rabbi Jonah Pesner, the director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, one of the major organizations in our movement, speaking on anti-Semitism, white supremacy, and bigotry in policy and practice, how the Jewish community can organize and create a more just society for all. On this Tuesday night, Michelle Fogley, LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist, will talk about how to get your teen or preteen talking and keep them talking. For anyone who has kids, grandkids, works in the field. This isn't my Hanukkah shopping. But those boxes out there need to be filled because on November 17th, which is a week from Sunday, right? 16th? Whatever, it's a week from Sunday, it's out there written down. 17th, thank you. On the 17th, we're going to be turning this place into a sacred assembly line, putting together 400 comfort bags for kids who will ultimately go into foster care because they need a safe place to grow. So we need 10,000 items. I think we're close to about halfway there. We still need playing cards. I think we have enough stuffed animals, but this was so cute I had to bring it with me. We do need, this is my frozen nightlight. We need some more of those. And on the board out there it says what else we need. We need this stuff. Get it. Go to your contacts who know people who have things. The whole list is out there. But please do it and then come and help us fill these bags. We have had people come back to the congregation who received those bags, whose life went on and said, in a moment of darkness, it provided the light. Or me, light of my people, light of all people. Let's make that happen. And then, lastly, I will let you know that two things. Next Shabbat will be a Shabbat pajama party at 4 o'clock. I'll be in my footsie pajamas with Rabbi Weiss and Andrew Fromer. And then we're having our shebang dinner and scientific family service at 6:30 with 6 Points SciTech Camp. You're going to want to be there. And then on the 23rd is Torah study with Rabbi Paul here in the sanctuary. It's 1 hour, 8:30 to 9:30. Come as you are. If you're going to the gym, wear your gym clothes. If you're going out to play with the kids, wear your shorts. If you want to get dressed up, go ahead, but I won't be. But we'd love to have you. We'll study, we'll learn, and kick your Shabbat day off to a great start. So please join us for that. There's more things happening. Our interfaith training for homelessness. It's not enough to be concerned about all that homelessness out there. We have to act and make things happen. So Reverend Zachary Hoover of LA Voice and Rabbi Julia Weiss will be doing a 2-hour training here at Congregation Orami. Let's put action behind our words, so please come and be with us. It's the anniversary, I think the 81st of Kristallnacht. That night, I'm sure I have the number of years wrong, but 1938. I got 81. In a town called Meppen, a small town north of Germany near the Dutch border, there was a family of Jews whose family had settled there 400 years before the Holocaust, probably as the result of the Spanish Inquisition. The patriarch of the family was head of the long-standing Jewish community in town, which had a beautiful synagogue. That synagogue was burned to the ground on Kristallnacht, November 9th, 1938. The Nazis required then the Jews of Meppen, Germany, to clean up their own filth, to quote them. This man was then 28 years old and was forced to clean the ruins of the synagogue as school children were brought in to watch, quote, the pigs in their trough. The man saw the burnt, torn piece of a breastplate, silver breastplate. The whole thing had been this big, and now about this much remained. He took it and hid it in his pants. And he went on cleaning. Had he been found out, he would have been killed. He took this breastplate with him through his journey, which included a work camp, 9 months in England, then to Boston in the 1940s. And it remained in his house for years. When Olivia and Andy Cohen-Cutler joined John, Stephanie Wolfson, and others starting Congregation Orami, they got a hold of this breastplate and brought it to Orami on Yom HaShoah then, so that this breastplate from the home of his family, their family, could live again on the Torah in their new synagogue. And if you look on the big Torah in our ark, you'll see that piece of the breastplate. After services, do come up and take a look. We keep the memory alive, not just by objects and not just by speaking about it, but by acting in this world to wipe out hatred wherever it is. And so tonight, as we prepare to say Kaddish, we remember all those whose lives were lost in the Shoah and the Holocaust, particularly those whose lives were destroyed during Kristallnacht. We also remember those who lost their lives during the shooting at the Borderline dance bar and club. Some of you here remembering your loved ones during this time of Kaddish. As I bring my hand around the room, I invite you to mention their names and relationship to you. We'll do it aloud. Tonight, we remember.
My colleague Jay Rose.
Asher ben Elchanan, Esther. Please rise as we turn to page 294 and we say together, Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach rutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'zman kariv imru amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam ol'olmei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbahar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei d'kudisha b'richu. Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shalom rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'rumav, u'yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who brings peace to the high heavens bring peace to us, to all Israel and all the world, as we say together. Amen. Close your prayer book, stay standing, put the prayer books behind you. If you're comfortable, put your arms around the people next to you. Let's close the service part of our evening with Hashkivenu, our nighttime prayer.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'shalom, L'shalom, V'ha'amidenu Shomenu L'chaim, Ufros Aleinu, Ufros Aleinu,
Sukkot Shlomecha. Ufros Aleinu, Sukkot Shlomecha. Amen. Shelter us beneath thy wings.
Shelter us beneath thy
O Adonai,
Adonai.
guard us from all harmful things.
Guard us from all harmful things.
O Adonai,
Adonai.
keep us safe throughout the night,
Keep us safe throughout the night.
till we wake with morning's light.
Till we wake with morning's
Teach
light.
us daily wrong from right.
Teach us daily wrong from
O
right.
Adonai,
Oh, Adonai. Amen. 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 Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. Please be seated. Madrache Shirah, just introduce yourself by name and what grade you're in.
I'm Colin. I'm in 9th grade.
I'm Elijah. I'm in 7th grade.
I'm Eden, and I'm in 7th grade as well.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Thank you also to, this is going to be ending this part of our service. The service part is ending now, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But before we do, thank you to our music leader, composer, singer, rabbinic student, Noah Diamondstein. You brought beautiful music to us. I know everyone wants to hear this again and again, and you can by getting the CD, Ashir Al Adonai, or by getting a download card, which any 4th grader or probably 2nd grader can teach you how to do on your computer. $10 for the CD, it's $7 for the download card. After we let out here, Steve Kellerman will be at the welcome table, and we're not taking money tonight, but you just give your name. If you have a credit card on file, tell them and we'll check it. If not, leave your phone number and we'll, actually everybody leaves your phone number and we'll search you out. This is a young rabbinic student. He's going to be a fantastic rabbi as he moves off next year, but now I want to make sure he eats well. I want to make sure he has a little to go out and enjoy life. So get 2 or 3 or 4 Hanukkahs coming up, some download cards. Make it happen, okay? Make me proud. Thank you. So we were purposeful in ending services before we introduced our congressperson. And the reason is because some people come to services and you just want to be able to say Kaddish or Misha Beirach and be done. And so if that's you and there are people in your site in the first year of mourning and you want to step out, please feel free to do so. It is an honor for this congregation to speak to our elected representatives, to hear what they are doing in their work, for them to hear from us. This is not a town hall where you hear clapping and screaming and booing and yelling. This is not a campaign rally where you hear all sorts of things. This is a synagogue. And this is a place of inclusion. This is a place where Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim, these are the words of the living God, where we hear majority and minority opinions, things we agree with and things we don't. That's the way of Jews, and if you don't understand it, go ask me to show you a page of Talmud. And there may be, this is the rule, but this rabbi disagrees, and this one disagrees, and that one disagrees even more, and that one condemns it. But in here, tonight, and hopefully all nights, we are going to show the world how we should act, not only in the political arena, but everywhere, where we recognize that people differ in their opinions, but we come together to hear. So in a minute, I will introduce our congressperson, and he'll speak for about 10-15 minutes and then take some questions. I'll be the moderator of questions. We'll go from there. Congress, and I reserve the right to call people out on the questions. It's not statement time, it's question time to learn and go. Questions are short, but we'll go through that. Congressman Ted W. Lieu represents California's 33rd Congressional District here in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's serving his third term in Congress and currently sits on the House Judiciary Committee, the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He was also elected by his Democratic colleagues to serve as co-chair of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. There's all sorts of other interesting things here and here. He has been leader in, I just can't read it all, you won't hear him. He's been an outspoken proponent for tackling climate change. He's one of the only 4 computer science majors currently serving in Congress, so is frequently sought out for his insight on technology and innovation matters, cybersecurity, and more. He's been a leader in Congress against ethnic and racial profiling and discrimination against the LGBTQ+ community. He serves as whip of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, vice chair of the LGBTQ Equality Caucus, and co-chair of the Cloud Computing Caucus. They're fighting to get onto that one. Recognizing, don't kid yourself. That's where the most important security can be happening. Recognizing the great opportunities America had given to his family, Congressperson Lieu wanted to serve his country to preserve the American dream. He joined the United States Air Force, where he served in the JAG Corps. After serving active duty for 4 years, he wanted to continue to serve his country and joined the reserves. He has received numerous medals for his outstanding military service, including the Air Force Humanitarian Service Medal and multiple meritorious service medals. His wife, Betty, is a member of the Torrance Board of Education, a former California Deputy Attorney General. They live in Torrance with their 2 sons. Help me give a warm Orami welcome to our Congressperson.
Good evening. Thank you, Rabbi Kipnis, for inviting me, and thank you, Congregation Orami, for having me here. I'd like to recognize my longtime friend Adam Traeger, who I've known since law school, and his wife Melina. Thank you for being here. So I'm going to talk about 2 local issues tonight, fires and homelessness, and then about 2 issues I'm working on in my committees in DC. One will be on gun safety legislation, another will be the U.S.-Israel relationship, and then I'll answer any questions that you may have. Before I do that, I'm going to share with you a little bit about my story, which is the same as many Americans. I am an immigrant, and when my parents looked at a map of America, they said we're going to Cleveland. So that's where I grew up. We were poor. My parents did not speak English well. We started off living in the basement of a person's home, and they went to flea markets and sold gifts and jewelry to make ends meet. After several years, they were able to save up their money, open one gift and jewelry store in the shopping center. Then they worked hard 7 days a week, saved up their money, and then opened one gift and jewelry store in the shopping mall. And then they expanded over 6 stores. My brother and I would help watch those stores because they didn't have to pay us. But I realized that they achieved the American dream. They went from being poor to a home, gave my brother and I an amazing education. He is a doctor now. My parents still remind me of that. And it is one reason I joined the Air Force in active duty. I believe I can never give back to America. Everything this amazing country is given to my family. One reason I choose to remain in the reserves. I am a colonel at the Space and Missile Systems Center. And that's one reason I'm in politics, is to make sure that this dream remains open for people who want to work hard and succeed. After duty Air Force, I'm also a recovering lawyer. I went and did private practice for about 5 years. I then served 1 term on the Torrance City Council, and then 9 years in the California State Legislature, and now I'm in my 5th year, 3rd in Congress. And I represent this amazing, beautiful district that goes from Malibu in the north, and then it has Calabasas, Agoura Hills, and it goes south and gets Santa Monica, Venice, Manhattan Beach, and Palos Verdes along the coast. And then it also, in the middle, goes out to Bel Air and Hancock Park. I tell people I have one of their least angry districts in America. And one thing that, however, has affected this district are the fires. It's 1 year since the Woolsey fire. It was as all of you know, a very devastating fire. And during those fires, I do want to thank all the first responders that did so much to do all they can to keep the fires. Congress members Julia Brownlee, Brad Sherman, and I, we did press conferences. We wrote letters to the administration. I do want to commend the Trump administration for providing full funding for the disaster victims. And then my district office, after the fires are done, we went and set up shop at the Conrad Hilton Foundation that opened up its offices, and we had all the levels of government there, city, county, state, and federal, and that allowed a victim to go to one place and get all the things that they needed together. As you can imagine, when your house burns down, lots of things get impacted, and that made it a lot better. We now have had additional fires, the Getty fire, the Palisades fire, so again, we'll be requesting full funding for those victims as well. And disaster assistance is something that traditionally has gotten bipartisan support in Congress. Members of Congress understand that when Mother Nature strikes, your party ideology doesn't matter. And from floods to hurricanes to wildfires, Congress has been pretty good in trying to provide disaster assistance to all the victims across America. In addition, we have a homelessness problem. It is a large problem. Last year, you may have seen California statewide had an over 30% spike in homelessness, which is pretty shocking when you think about that. And within LA County, the numbers have continued to grow. The federal government is responsible for homeless people who happen to be veterans. And we've been able to, actually, if you look at the numbers, maintain the homeless veterans population actually relatively stable, and there was, I think, a slight decrease last year. One reason is because we have a very good program called the HUD VASH voucher. It does 2 things. The HUD part provides housing to the veteran. The VASH part provides services. In addition, the West LA VA is in my district. It's the nation's largest VA. For many decades, it was quite dysfunctional. In fact, it got sued by veterans. Secretary Bob McDonald, a few years ago, came in and said, "This is stupid. Why are we having veterans sue the VA? We should settle this lawsuit." And I worked with him and other stakeholders. Lawsuit was settled, and one of the first bills that got signed into law allowed the West LA VA to have a whole new master plan. At its full build-out, it will have over 1,200 units to house homeless veterans. We now have a master plan developer, and we've already renovated one building, and additional ones will be coming online. But just because the federal government only deals with homeless people who happen to be veterans doesn't mean that it should always be that way. And that's why Senator Feinstein and I have introduced legislation that would provide $750 million to local cities and counties to deal with the entire homeless population, and hopefully we can get that through. It is going to require a lot of different levels of government to work together. It is a difficult problem. I was pleased that a few months ago I was able to work with Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, and we inserted language in the National Defense Authorization Act that allowed an armory in LA County to renovate, expand, and to house homeless veterans. So happy to take any questions on homelessness issues. And then in DC, I am on the Judiciary Committee. And for the first time in 25 years, we passed significant gun safety legislation. We passed universal background checks on guns. As some of you may know, the way the current system works is, let's say you want to go purchase a gun in California. You go to a gun dealer, you give a bunch of private information. Gun dealer runs a background check, usually comes back within a few minutes, maybe 10, 20 minutes, and then generally you're cleared and you can buy the gun, or it'll say you're not cleared and you cannot get the gun. Or you go to Nevada, show up at a gun show, pay cash, and get as many guns as you want without even showing ID. Most people look at that and think that is a crazy loophole, and there's other loopholes in this system. So the universal background checks bill closes that and says, look, if you're gonna sell a gun, we don't care if it's a gun dealer or a gun show or some other sort of transaction, you're gonna have to go through a background check for the person who's buying the gun to get it. That has about 90% support among the American people based on various polls. It is also bipartisan. It passed the House. It is now before the US Senate. And so we're trying to put pressure on Senator Mitch McConnell to bring this bill up for a vote. If he does, it will also pass the US Senate. We're working on other gun legislation as well. So we also passed at the same time something called they're closing the Charleston loophole. You may remember in Charleston there was a shooting at a church where their person went in and killed a whole bunch of people who were actually praying at the time. If you look at what happened there, he should not have gotten the gun. He actually would have been denied by that background check, but because under the current system, if you don't get an answer back within 3 days, the gun dealer can sell the gun to the person. What this bill would say is, look, if you don't get it back within 3 days, you cannot still sell the gun. You need an affirmative answer one way or another from the federal agency. If it gets past 10 days, then I think there's a process where you can go ahead and sell the gun. And that's also before the US Senate as well. So the other committee I'm on is Foreign Affairs, and we have oversight over the foreign policy of the United States. One of the critical areas is the US-Israel relationship. So I'm gonna, first of all, tell you why I'm pro-Israel. I've always known intellectually how important Israel is to the United States. It is in a critical region of the world. It's the only democracy in a very, very troubled region. And Israel is at the tip of the spear, pushing back against terrorist nations and terrorist groups. And I've always understood that it's critical to US national security. But I wanted to have a more emotional understanding of Israel. So I went to Israel with the LA Jewish Federation when I was in the California State Legislature. And I went with my wife, and we were a little scared because we were watching images on TV. It was bombings, everything's happening. And I remember we landed at the airport. There was this big demonstration going on. And I told my wife, I said, oh, there must be some national security thing happening. As we get closer, it's a teacher strike. I said, oh, look, it's the same old world over. So then they took us the next day to Jerusalem. My wife and I happen to be Catholic, and so we saw the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, really important to us. We also went and visited the wall, and then at a distance you could see the Dome of the Rock, and it was instantly very clear to me why this little region of the world had all this conflict for centuries. You had three major religions with very holy sites. These religions all within walking distance of each other. But we also saw at the time the promise of Jerusalem. At that time, the people were living peacefully, and it was an amazing experience to be in Jerusalem. A little bit later, they took us down south, and we went to a military outpost near the town of Sderot. Thank you. And we went to the second floor landing of this military outpost, and the IDF captain proceeded to give us a briefing. And he said, look across the horizon, there is Gaza. Israel provides most of the power to Gaza, and they launch rockets over. Didn't make a lot of sense to me, and as the briefing kept on going, at some point a younger IDF soldier comes up, the second floor landing, proceeds to have an argument with the captain. And lasts for a couple minutes, and then a younger soldier leaves, and then the briefing ends in about 5 more minutes. So we go back on the bus, and I asked the guide, I said, what was that all about? And the guide said, the younger soldier told the older soldier, please get these people out of here. They're making us targets. And I remember at the time you could look up in the air and see these metallic balloon-like things that were early warning systems for these rockets that would come over. And it struck me that you could see the Israelis there working and playing and taking their kids to school and shopping. And at any moment, a rocket could land and kill them. A little bit later, they then took us to Tel Aviv, and we went to this restaurant that overlooked the water. We had shawarma. I love shawarma. And it was a really good meal. And then we went back on the bus, and the guide said, about 1.5 years earlier, a woman went into that restaurant, had lunch, and then blew herself up. And then the restaurant reconstituted, and they're still serving shawarma. And to see the resilience of the Israeli people was quite amazing. They also showed us a map of the threat to Israel from missiles. Some of you may have seen that map. It's simply Israel, and it's just crisscrossed with black lines. And they also explained to us how dangerous Iran was. So after that trip, I co-authored legislation in California that then became law that required California's pension funds to divest from Iran's nuclear and energy industries. I co-authored a second law that said that if any company does business with Iran's nuclear energy industries, they cannot contract with the state of California. So both of those things are now law in California. And then I had this amazing opportunity to go back to Israel with the AIPAC Education Fund. And they also took us down south, but we saw something quite different. We saw an Iron Dome missile battery. And as some of you may know, it's an amazing system that has about 85% or higher success rate in intercepting rockets that are launched at Israel. Before that, there was a briefing in Washington, D.C. It is classified, but the last slide on this briefing is not. So I'm going to tell you about that slide. It was a picture of a bride and groom who had just gotten married. And it's around dusk time when the picture was taken. And behind them, you see a streak of light. And the briefer said, that is an Iron Dome rocket firing. And he said, these two people did not care. They were having the time of their life. And what this system allowed is as many Israelis to live as normal a life as they possibly could. And it was quite a moving experience to see this Iron Dome missile battery. Raytheon is the prime contractor. They are in my district. I also had a chance to actually see it again at the AIPAC conference last year. And I'm a big supporter of U.S. assistance for Israeli missile systems, not just Iron Dome, but also David Sling and the Aero Missile Defense System as well. In addition, in Congress, I've authored a number of bills about the U.S.-Israel relationship. I authored a bill that talks about the economic partnership between the U.S. and Israel. As some of you know, California signed an MOU with Israel on water technology and other issues. And that passed the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and we're looking forward to it also getting off the floor. And then I've introduced legislation on directed energy, also known as lasers. It turns out that Israel is one of the probably the leading country in terms of direct energy. So this bill would require the U.S. to partner with Israel on that technology and eventually to get to a state where we can use direct energy to shoot down missiles, including ICBMs. In terms of other legislation, the Foreign Affairs Committee, I do like it. It is one of the most bipartisan committees. Much of the legislation we pass is bipartisan, including on Israel. And so whatever I can do to improve the U.S.-Israel relationship, I will. So with that, thanks for having me here. Happy to answer any questions you may have. And again, I'm grateful you allowed me to be here.
Thank you. When I was in rabbinical school, they taught us the difference between a sermon and a sermon. A sermon had an idea and explicated it, and that was it. The sermon you don't want to give went on and on and on and on and on. So with questions, I want to teach you what a question is and what a question isn't. There are town hall meetings that happen regularly where you can go give your opinions and what have you. This is time for questions. A question is short, a sentence or two. Sweet, respectful. We'll let the congressperson answer and then we'll move forward. So, questions. Say your name and...
Steve Kleinenberg. I'm curious, you mentioned that there was a 30% increase in homelessness in the last year. Is there any data on why it increased so rapidly in a year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had a meeting with Mayor Garcetti earlier this year, and I asked him that question. So there's a lot of factors that cause homelessness, one of which is, sort of ironically, as California's economy got better, it actually ended up displacing a lot of people because costs started going up, rent started going up, and the mayor actually said there are now a fair number of people who are working and are homeless. They're either in their cars or they're on the streets and they're still working. So there is that issue, just the way the economy works in terms of rising rents. Mental illness continues to be a significant problem, drug abuse. There's also sort of this interesting misconception that I didn't really understand until I looked into it and dealt with some of the issues. It turns out that a number of people who are homeless actually will not go to shelters or even homes. And I know this because the VA actually tracks a lot of veterans who are homeless, and they will go out to their folks on the streets and work with them, and they will offer them places to stay, and they don't take it because for a number of reasons. One, they lose a significant amount of freedom. Second, they may have to go clean. They don't want to do that. Third, they might want to bring their pets or some belongings which are not allowed. So there's a variety of reasons where you could build a brand new shelter right next to them and you'll have the same exact problem. So it is very complicated, and we do need lots of stakeholders and lots of layers of government working together to address it.
There was a article in Atlanta, I don't know if you read this month, about the threat from Israel, from Iran, which is anything but existential. I'm sorry, I'm Robert Moss. It's a very scary article, and I would recommend those of you who haven't read it to read it. This is at a time where we are hearing from a lot of candidates that perhaps the aid to Israel should be conditioned on meeting certain criteria. I'm wondering if you could comment on that and how much support you think that has within the House of Representatives.
So the question is about conditioning aid to Israel. I would oppose that. In addition, I think you have, so one thing I've learned, which is sort of interesting, I'm going to tell you a little bit about sort of how the legislative cycle works. We're in 2-year legislative cycles. In those 2 years, I vote over 1,000 times. And on 80% of those issues, I don't get a single phone call, fax, email, or meeting. And so members of Congress are walking around dealing with 1,000 issues. Many of them have districts that don't have a high Jewish population, so they just don't think about Israel. It's just not in their top 10 things that they ever think about. And so, for example, you have one candidate, Mayor Buttigieg, who's the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, who likely never dealt with foreign policy ever in his professional job. So he made a statement, something that sounded like conditioning in Israel, and then he walked it back, I think the next day or so. And so a lot of it is sort of just educating people about the issues and the history and the importance of Israel. So there is that. There's a large education thing that has to happen, I think, for not just presidential candidates, but also members of Congress. Some do have a very specific belief on that I disagree with. I don't think that's where Congress is at all.
Hi, I'm Megan. What are the solutions that you're proposing in your homelessness bill?
Thank you for that question. So one reason that I think the veterans homeless population has not spiked is because you do have this pretty good program that doesn't just provide housing, it also has a lot of services that are directed at that veteran to make sure that they don't eventually become homeless again. So the legislation I have with Senator Feinstein would actually, if passed, provide $750 million specifically for services to be delivered from local cities and counties to people who are homeless to try to make sure that they don't go back to being homeless once you get them shelter. Congresswoman Maxine Waters also has a very, very large bill that would do a lot with the homeless issue. It's also very, very expensive. So offline, I can give you more information about that issue. It is a very difficult issue because there's so many different causes of homelessness and different ways to try to attack it. I just think we need to try everything. There's, like any large population, some people may respond to certain things and not others. I think we just have to try everything on the population and see if we can reduce it.
Myron Dembo. How do you deal with the pressure of staying in a district and working on re-election every 2 years, fundraising, and also do all the great work that you have been doing in Washington? What's the secret?
Power bars are helpful. So the travel was probably the worst part. My biological clock is totally out of whack, so I'll feel tired at random parts of the day. And then I'm away from my family half the time, thousands of miles away. So that is difficult, but you do get to try to affect change at a national level. So that does keep me going. I have learned as an elected official to redefine the notion of victory a long time ago. And I wish every bill I wrote becomes law. That never happens. But I know that sometimes when you introduce legislation, you could cause maybe the public to think about it and issue in a different way than they otherwise would have before. And so you just learn to try to affect public sentiment how you can.
Hi, I'm Stacy. You have this unique position where you've seen the best and the most trying parts of our country. And I'm just curious as to what continues to renew your faith, what keeps you going, and what refills your faith with everything that you see and interact with.
Sure, thank you. Just being with people, the different events I go to, whether it's local or in DC, I see the goodness of America. I also want to just have you think about Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. Regardless of what you think about it, his conclusions, I just want you to think about the actual process. So it was done largely at a time when Republicans controlled the House and the Senate and the White House. And this was a Republican-led investigation by Robert Mueller, Republican, in a Republican-controlled Department of Justice against a Republican president, and it was allowed to proceed to its conclusion, which is pretty amazing. I don't think many countries would have allowed that to have happened, so that tells me that our institutions are relatively strong. And so that gives the faith and hope that most Americans still believe in the rule of law.
This is on a topic that you touched on, but I'd like to go a little deeper about it. It has to do with the Second Amendment. Do you think, with your statements, that the Second Amendment needs to be amended?
So that is a very good question. So let me sort of let me first say what it is right now. Based on the Second Amendment and how the Supreme Court has interpreted it, people have the right to own guns. It doesn't mean they have, in my opinion, the right to have no regulations on guns. So Justice Scalia, in the opinion, actually said there can be reasonable regulations on guns. So to me, background checks would be reasonable regulations on guns. Saying that you can't have automatic weapons, I think, would be a reasonable regulation on guns. That's why the administration and Congress both agree that bump stocks should be banned. Some of you may know in the Las Vegas shooting, a bump stock turned a semi-automatic weapon to an automatic weapon, which allowed the gun to fire a high rate of speed to kill a lot of people in a very short time period. So under the current law, you can have reasonable regulations on guns. So what you're asking is, and should in fact there just be no guns? I think with the history of the United States, I don't think we could actually ever get there. I don't think the Second Amendment would actually ever be amended.
But don't we now have a well-regulated militia?
So what you're saying is the Supreme Court interpreted the Second Amendment wrongly? I think there are legitimate legal arguments that they may have, but the Supreme Court is in fact the final word on the Constitution. So unless that has changed, I'm going to follow it, and it's the system that we currently have.
Mayor Bargeron. It's no secret, I think, to anybody who's paying attention to anything, that we live in a time where there is a great deal of polarization. And in the work that you do in representing your constituents, I'm curious what you might like us to know about in terms of points of connection, bipartisan cooperation, ideas that people talk about across party lines that maybe we don't hear about.
Sure, thank you for that question. So before I went to Congress, I thought, oh, they just fight a lot. So now that I'm in Congress, it's true we fight a lot. It's also true that we get a lot of things done that you don't read about, for the same reason that you don't read about planes at land. It doesn't sell newspapers, doesn't sell ads on TV. So there is a number of bills that have been signed into law that have helped a lot of different Americans, whether it's veterans or other people. I've gotten cybersecurity bills signed into law. And so unless you watch C-SPAN 24 hours a day, you're not going to get this. It also turns out that even though the two parties don't sort of have the same views on certain issues like healthcare and so on, a lot of issues are not partisan. So for example, cybersecurity is not partisan. Right? There's no such thing as a cybersecurity Republican offense or Democratic defensive cybersecurity thing. I mean, it's just cybersecurity. So there are a number of these issues where you can get things done. In addition, politics is also sort of like a circle. Sometimes you're so right, you're left, and vice versa. So on the issue of privacy, for example, you have this, so let me take a step back. When I first ran for Congress, my main campaign and TV ad was that the NSA was violating your rights. A lot of people thought it was an odd campaign. I won, so there's that. But I was always a big believer in privacy. In the state legislature, one of the last laws that got passed basically directed California state officials to not provide information to our intelligence agencies, such as NSA, unless they had a specific warrant on you. In my reading of the Fourth Amendment, seems pretty clear to me that the government needs a warrant on you before they can engage in a search or a seizure. And what our intelligence agencies were doing at the time is they were vacuuming up every American's phone records, all 300-some million people, and they knew who you called, who called you, the duration of those calls, the time of those calls, so they could tell if you called a suicide prevention hotline. They could tell if you called Alcoholics Anonymous. They could tell if you called a prostitute. They could tell all sorts of things that you may not actually want people to know. And they had no warrants to do that. Nothing from a court that said, hey, I can get, Joe Smith's phone records. So Congress actually rolled that back. And it was a coalition of very progressive Democrats and Tea Party Republicans. And so there are these interesting issues where you can get sort of those coalitions. I'm working on an issue of bail reform right now. So a little bit about this issue. Right now there are hundreds of thousands of people sitting in jail and prison, not because they've been convicted of anything, but because they can't afford to pay the fee to leave. And that has very, very negative consequences. One is it essentially sort of is disproportionately targeted at the poor. Second, studies show that people who are in this position tend to plead guilty at much higher rates because they're exactly the same folks that can't stay there for weeks on end because they lose their child care, they don't know how to pay for their rent, they lose their low-paying job. And then third, it's totally irrational, right? There's no study that shows any linkage between how dangerous you are versus how much cash on hand you can access. So I wrote a bill last term along with Democratic Senator Kamala Harris and Republican Senator Rand Paul, right? Sort of an interesting coalition, as well as Congressman Republican Carlos Cabello in the House. So you'll get these issues where you can work together on a bipartisan basis. So that happens more frequently than you think. Unless you watch C-SPAN, you won't know about it, or you call my office, we'll tell you about it.
The night's getting late. I'll ask you one final question. Actually, you get the last question.
Okay.
Tell us your name.
I'm Eden Radican, and in school I was on a debate team, and we learned a lot about gun violence and gun laws, and what would be best in order to have more gun restrictions and to get universal background checks. And when we really thought about it, we saw, yes, universal background checks are great, but what about ghost guns? Like, how do you protect people from those? Because those deals go on countless times a day, without anyone knowing.
Right. Yeah. So it is a large problem. We do have a epidemic of gun violence, and now no single bill will solve that. Based on latest data from 2017, over 38,000 people died of gun violence in that year. That comes out to approximately a little over 4 people per hour. So by the end of this service and my talk this evening, another 6 people would have died of gun violence in America. So it also turns out that 60-some% of gun violence victims are suicides. And one of the pieces of legislation we're working on that states have done that has shown some effect in reducing gun violence deaths are what's known as red flag laws. So if you think that your Uncle Jim or your Aunt Mary is massively depressed or about to go off the deep end and they should not have access to guns, you can petition a court to essentially take away their guns for a temporary amount of time. So that's been shown to actually reduce gun violence somewhat in those states, largely by reducing suicides. So there is legislation now to assist states in this effort. So it's just going to require, I think, a multi-pronged attack in terms of trying to reduce gun violence across America.
We could talk all night, but we won't. And I promised the congressperson, as he freed up time to be here tonight, that I would make sure he was able to get on his way. So he'll be able to greet a few of us for a little bit out there, and then I need to get him on the way. I want to thank you, Congressperson Liu, for being with us. May you continue to be blessed in your work, upholding the Constitution, safeguarding America, Israel, our Jewish community, and all people. We appreciate it. Thank you for being with us. Good night. Thank you all. Remember, get some CDs or some download cards. Steve will be at the front gate. Thank you all for being here tonight. Shabbat Shalom.